A woman once described the worst day of her relationship and the best day of her relationship, and when she finished talking, it became clear she was describing the same 24 hours. That contradiction sounds impossible until you understand the psychology behind it. It has a name, trauma bonding, and it explains one of the most confusing human experiences there is: staying attached, sometimes fiercely attached, to someone or something that consistently causes pain. Trauma bonding isn't about weakness, and it isn't about poor judgment. It's about a very specific pattern of reinforcement that hijacks the same systems in the brain responsible for ordinary attachment, except it uses fear and relief instead of consistent safety. Here's the mechanism. In a healthy bond, comfort is the baseline. You feel safe most of the time, with occasional friction that gets resolved. In a trauma bond, the pattern flips. Tension, fear, or hurt becomes the baseline, and comfort becomes the exception, the relief that arrives after something painful. That relief, precisely because it follows distress, feels enormous. Far bigger than ordinary affection ever could, because your nervous system is comparing it not to a neutral state, but to the fear that came right before it. Psychologists have studied a closely related phenomenon for decades under the name intermittent reinforcement. Behavioral research has repeatedly shown that rewards delivered unpredictably create stronger, more persistent behavior than rewards delivered consistently. It's the same principle behind gambling. A slot machine doesn't pay out every time, and that unpredictability is exactly why it's so hard to walk away from. A relationship with a trauma bond runs on the same underlying wiring. You're not staying for the bad moments. You're staying because your brain has been trained to chase the incredible relief that follows them, and that relief has become tangled up with your definition of love itself. Picture a man named David. His partner has a temper that flares without warning, sometimes over something as small as a delayed reply to a text. The arguments are frightening, occasionally cruel, but afterward, without fail, comes an apology unlike anything he's experienced elsewhere. Tears, tenderness, a version of her that feels almost achingly vulnerable, promising it will never happen again. David has told friends that those reconciliation moments are the closest he's ever felt to another human being. He isn't wrong about the closeness. He's wrong about what's producing it. The closeness isn't happening despite the cycle. It's being manufactured by it. This is the part that surprises most people. The bond doesn't survive the cycle of harm and relief. The bond is made of it. Remove the harm entirely, and for someone deep in a trauma bond, the relationship can start to feel strangely flat, even boring, because the nervous system has been calibrated to associate real intensity with real love. There's a reason this pattern is so difficult to walk away from, and it isn't only emotional. Chronic stress affects memory in specific ways. Frightening experiences tend to be encoded vividly, but so, disproportionately, are the moments of relief that follow them. Over time, a kind of selective memory takes hold. The frightening arguments blur together into something vague and forgivable. The reconciliations stay sharp, vivid, almost cinematic. When someone in this situation tries to explain the relationship to a friend, they often find themselves unconsciously reaching for the vivid memories rather than the blurry ones, not out of dishonesty, but because that's genuinely what feels most retrievable and most true in the moment. It's worth pausing here to draw a clear line, because otherwise this pattern gets confused with something far more ordinary: normal conflict. Every close relationship involves disagreement, and repairing after a fight is not evidence of a trauma bond. The distinguishing feature isn't that hard moments happen, it's the shape of the cycle itself. In a healthy relationship, an argument is the disruption and calm is the return to normal. In a trauma bond, fear or humiliation is the normal, and calm is the disruption, the brief exception that has to be earned back. If you find yourself feeling more relaxed during the tense stretch than during the supposed good moments, because you're bracing for the good moments to end, that inversion is a far more reliable signal than the presence of conflict on its own. There's also a physiological layer to this that's worth understanding, because it explains why logic alone rarely resolves it. Repeated exposure to unpredictable stress keeps the body's threat-response system engaged for far longer than a single argument would ever justify. Cortisol and adrenaline don't shut off cleanly the moment an apology is offered. They linger, and the relief that follows them gets chemically amplified simply because of what it's following. This is part of why people in trauma bonds often describe the making-up phase in almost euphoric terms. It isn't an exaggeration. It's an accurate description of what a stressed nervous system experiences when the threat briefly lifts. This same architecture explains why trauma bonds show up far beyond romantic relationships. It appears in some family dynamics where a parent's unpredictable approval keeps a child chasing validation well into adulthood. It appears in cult psychology, and researchers who study coercive groups describe cycles of harsh discipline followed by intense belonging as one of the primary tools that keeps members from leaving. It even appears in some workplace cultures, where a demanding, volatile boss occasionally offers just enough praise or opportunity to keep talented people enduring conditions they'd otherwise never accept. Consider a woman named Priya, 3 years into a job under a manager known for public criticism and unpredictable moods. Most days are tense, but every so often, the same manager singles her out for extraordinary praise in front of the entire team, tells her she's the only one who truly understands the vision, hints at a promotion that never quite materializes. Priya has turned down 2 other job offers. When asked why, she doesn't mention the good days specifically. She says something closer to, "I feel like I finally understand how to work with someone like that," as though the skill of surviving the volatility has become confused with genuine commitment to the work itself. Recognizing a trauma bond from the inside is unusually difficult, because the primary emotion involved often isn't anger toward the other person. It's closeness. That closeness is real as a felt experience, even while the situation producing it is genuinely harmful, and holding both of those truths at once is one of the hardest things the human mind is asked to do. A gentler way to check this in real time without waiting for hindsight is to notice how you talk about the relationship immediately after a hard moment versus a week later. In the immediate aftermath of reconciliation, most people describe the relationship in glowing, almost superlative terms. Given a week of ordinary distance, without a fresh cycle to color the memory, the description tends to become far more measured, sometimes strikingly different. That gap between the immediate account and the distant one is often more honest than either version feels in the moment it's spoken, and it's a useful thing to actually write down rather than trust to memory, since memory, as we've seen, is exactly what this pattern quietly distorts. There is a practical distinction worth using here. Ask what the relationship would look like with the fear completely removed, not softened, removed entirely. If the honest answer is that very little would be left, that the connection depends on the cycle of conflict and repair to feel alive at all, that's worth taking seriously, not as a verdict on your character, but as information about the architecture holding the bond together rather than the 2 people inside it. Breaking a trauma bond rarely happens through willpower alone, because willpower is trying to override a conditioning process the nervous system built without asking permission. What tends to help far more is distance, literal physical or communicative distance, long enough for the nervous system's baseline to reset, so that ordinary calm can start registering as safety again, rather than as something faintly like boredom. Support from people outside the situation matters enormously here too, because they're the ones who can see the blurred, forgotten difficult moments clearly, when your own memory has been quietly editing them into something smaller than they were. None of this is about blame. toward yourself, or, in most cases, even toward the other person, who is very often caught in a version of the same conditioning themselves. It's about understanding that some of the strongest bonds people ever feel are not proof of love's depth. They're proof of how completely the brain can be trained to mistake relief for connection. If any part of this described something you've lived, you're not alone in it, and understanding the pattern is genuinely the first real step out of it. If you want more of this kind of clarity, this is exactly the place to find it. So, stay with us.